In part 1 of our interview, 8-Bit, creator of the YouTube channel 8-Bit Music Theory, shared his backstory and thoughts on his work. We continued by discussing one of his recent video essays that analyzes music from the video game Super Mario Galaxy and traces that music's influences back to the 1800s. Yeah, and just to use an example of a recent video, your one about Rosalina, a Disney princess. Yeah. And again, playing Mario Galaxy, I'd listened through like, this sounds like Disney, and I couldn't explain why. And your video explains why with wonderful melodic and harmonic analysis. And I'm curious, I mean, just for anyone who hasn't watched this video, which I highly recommend, we look at harmonic and rhythmic analysis of Super Mario Galaxy, Mario game music, tying it into Disney music of kind of their golden age, if you will, but also tying that back to influences from the Romantic period. And I'm just kind of fascinated to know. So you have a music education. Are these ideas that emanated from your music education, or just your own curiosity to keep learning more things, or a combination of both?
Well, so a big part of that video, I have to thank my daughter for. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and so she's just in love with Disney princesses, you know. And so over the last year or two, I've seen Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White probably 100 times each. And those are great movies. Like going back and watching them, I was like, man, these are fantastic. And the music is fantastic. And so I had these melodies kind of bouncing around my head for a long time. And then the tune I analyzed in that Mario video is kind of like one of the classic. It's not as old as some of the classic video game melodies, but it's definitely like one of the top pieces of music from video games. I was thinking that would be a perfect topic for a video. It's one of those tunes where I feel like I have to cover it at some point.
Yep.
And having all these Disney melodies floating around in my head, I was thinking, oh, these sound really similar. Here's, you know, I like to just try and figure things out on piano and figuring out like, oh yeah, this chord, like that's similar, that's from that tune. Oh, okay. So I started to build this idea of a video of, okay, Rosalina's Observatory is a Disney princess tune. That's a fun video. Okay. But then just in my own kind of, I really am a big nerd. I can't stress that enough. When I'm not working on videos analyzing music for fun, what I like to do is just read through scores and things like that. And going through jazz school, learned a lot about jazz, learned a little bit about classical music, but a very kind of surface level, just kind of get the basic, you know, dates and periods and whatever. But I did take one elective in school it was a classical piano, kind of just looking at the evolution of the solo piano sonata through the history of classical music. And it was so interesting. It was one of my favorite classes I took, maybe because I hadn't had that deep of a introduction to classical music before then, but he was really getting into the nitty-gritty details of like this type of chord voicing. You can see that influence this following composer, and that stuff just totally delights me. And so ever since taking that class, I've been kind of like in my spare time trying to learn more about classical music and get more deep into it. And so it just so happened that my new thing that I've been doing is reading Tchaikovsky scores, because I love Tchaikovsky's music. And so it was like thinking about this video and letting this idea kind of develop in my brain for a little bit. And in my free time, I was looking through Tchaikovsky scores, and I started to see like, oh, that's that chord movement again that I've been thinking about. So it was kind of good luck that I happened to be exposed to all this stuff at the same time. But so it turned into a much longer video than I had anticipated. Like, oh, you know, do a little bit of research and I should say Sleeping Beauty, the music from the movie, was adapted from a Tchaikovsky ballet too. So I thought, oh, well, that's a pretty obvious connection. Yeah. And so then looking into it more, and oh yes, this piece by Liszt was a huge influence on the Cinderella piece from Cinderella. There's all these other different connections to make. So I had a lot to work with. I tried to boil it down into I think it's only like 15 minutes or something, maybe a little longer. But that was a really, really fun video to make. Really, because that's another thing. Like, I feel like I'm not in my video. I don't see myself as an educator, partially because I'm not like, I know this thing. I'm going to make a video teaching this thing,
Yeah.
it's usually kind of a process of, I want to learn how to do this better. I want to learn, like, oh, why does Rosalina's theme sound like Disney music? And then I kind of work it out and figure something out, make some connections and go, oh, I learned something. That's why. Now let me put that in a video and put it out. You know what I mean? Or, oh, I want to learn how to write better melodies, so I'm going to try and make a video on how to write a better melody and see if that helps me. I feel like I'm the one learning in all these, in the process of making these.
Yeah, so it's almost like there's this curiosity. And that leads you to want to try stuff out and discover things. You document the process. And for those who are similarly interested on YouTube, it's kind of like we're along for the ride for what you're seeking out.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be the case.
Yeah.
That's the ideal, if people can follow my train of thought. It's almost like starting the video in a place of ignorance.
Yeah.
And then, documenting the process of getting to a better understanding. I think that is something that people can enjoy, even if they don't necessarily, because I don't try and make videos for like an entry level audience.
Yeah.
I get a lot of comments of, I don't know what you were saying, but I watched the whole thing and I liked it.
Yes.
And in my mind, I'm like, why did you like it? I wouldn't like it if I didn't know what I was talking about. But there is something to be said about just that process of going from point A to point B. That's engaging. And I think that you do kind of pick up things, even if you're a little bit in over your head, you still kind of pick up things through osmosis, or even just kind of seeing things laid out a certain way. Maybe it takes a little while or a couple more exposures to get an actual working knowledge, but that kind of gets you in the process. That's always been kind of my approach to everything, though. Even when I was a little kid learning drums, I would try and learn a drum beat I couldn't play, and then, try get to a point where I could almost kind of play it, and then I'd try and do something like way harder, which I don't think is the best the best way to learn an instrument, but that's always been kind of my approach, is like getting over your head and just see how much you can soak up, I guess.
That makes sense. I love the idea of these video essays being researched and written simply for the sake of learning, and that we, the viewers, are along for the learning journey. I was also impressed with a reminder on how an inspiring class can lead to in-depth lifelong learning. In 8-Bit's case, how a study on the history of piano sonatas can further a hobby of advanced music study. Join us in part 3 of this series for the closing thoughts from our discussion.